Welcome to the Cardinal Newman Sixth Form Taster Lesson for A-Level English Literature. My name is Miss Dowd as well, and I'll be your guide for today. So with today's lesson, I give you a hearty welcome to the English Literature course. Hopefully this lesson will give you a bit of a taster as to the kinds of skills, concepts and ideas that you'll be tackling and discussing in your lessons, and a little bit about the course structure as well, and what is expected of you, and what you can expect of the course. So the course is made up of 4 components: poetry, drama, unseen, and then you tackle the prose, which is novels, in your non-exam assessment, which I suppose is similar to what you think of as coursework. We've got lots of exciting texts for you to explore and uncover. In the poetry, you're going to be treated to Shears's Skirrid Hill, Heaney's Fieldwork. You'll also get a chance to look at Chaucer's Merchant's Tale, which is an absolute hoot, very joyous, and a new challenge with some medieval English in there for you. For the drama, you've got a great selection as well. You've got Shakespeare's The Tempest. You've also got a comparison between A Streetcar Named Desire and the Duchess of Malfi. We're going to have a little look at the Duchess of Malfi today, just to whet your appetite. And the third component, unseen, is similar to what you'd come across in your literature, where you'll have extracts that you wouldn't have seen before, but you apply the same skills that you would for the other 2 exams. The last component will involve The Great Gatsby, which you will do as part of your transition task, and then we offer you a choice of a few different texts for you to choose to accompany it, to write a comparison. It's such a great opportunity to do that non-exam assessment, to really flourish and explore your own passions and interests within English literature. Lots of students really enjoy that element of the course. If you'd like to know any more, you've got the handout on the Teams area, so do have a look on there, and that'll give you a bit more in depth of the authors and so on. So what you might be wondering is, how am I assessed on these? And really it covers all of the assessment objectives, not too dissimilar from your English Literature GCSE, but a few added things in there. I'm not going to spend a long time on the assessment objectives, because I know you're super eager to get into looking at a text, but I thought it would be useful just to skirt over them, so when I'm going through some of the tasks you understand why we're actually looking at them. So AO1 is essentially your understanding of a text and your response to it. Are you able to use terminology? Are you able to write in an academic fashion? And we help you with that. We train you into that as well. AO2, this is my favourite one, the big one, analysing ways in which meanings are shaped. So it's not about hunting for techniques. Okay, oh, here's some alliteration, here's some enjambment, but it's always about thinking about how the writers are creating meaning. What is their aim when they're communicating, and how do they use language, structure, form to do that? So that one's really the exploratory assessment objective. AO3 is context. You will have had practice with this in your GCSE, and actually some of the context we're going to be looking at today is similar to the Shakespearean context you would know as well, so that's quite a nice familiar link for you to already have a little bit of cultural capital on that historical context. AO4 is the connections between texts. You've had a little bit of practice with this in your GCSE, but actually it's not an assessment objective that features very heavily in there. So this one is something that's much more of a challenge when you get to A level, and we practice that as we build through the text as well. AO5, this is a great one because it means you're exploring with different interpretations. Those of you who are really pushing on challenging yourselves in your GCSE will remember being told, oh, can you see that from more than one perspective? And that's exactly what AO5 is. This time though, we up the ante with some more critics' interpretations now. So it's not just about what you think, but consulting critics' understanding and exploration of text as well, which adds a new challenge to the course as well from your GCSE. Okay, so I think it'd be great for you at this point to jump into one of the texts. I've picked the Duchess of Malfi today. It might be personal preference. I love it. It's a revenge tragedy by John Webster. So for a second, just pause and think, what do you associate with revenge? What do you associate with tragedy? Absolutely, you're thinking things like violence, deceit, murder, theft, affairs, deviance, and so on. And you can rest assured that you will find this in the Duchess of Malfi. It's jam-packed. So let's go to the mind of this creation briefly, and you'll see that is John Webster. If you look in the top yellow box, he was featured as a cameo in the film Shakespeare in Love, which is fictional but is based on lots of evidence from the time. So in the film, he's shown to be a young boy, which he would have been. He would have gone and seen Shakespeare's productions at the Globe as a young boy, and he was a young street urchin in the film who enjoys feeding live mice to cats. And when asked by Shakespeare in the film what he thought of one of Shakespeare's most violent plays, Titus Andronicus, Webster replies, "I like it when they cut their heads off and the daughter mutilated with knives. Plenty of blood, that is the only writing." Creepy, great. Later in the film, when asked what he thinks of Romeo and Juliet, which is obviously what many of you have studied for your GCSE, Webster says, "I liked it when she stabbed herself." All of this is, of course, fictional, but the characters in Webster's tragedies do tend to meet rather gruesome ends. He's known for his two macabre tragedies based on real-life events in Italy. So The White Devil, based on Italian noblewoman Vittoria Accoramboni and her illicit affair. It results in lots of blood and violence and tragedy. And then his second most famous piece, The Duchess of Malfi, which is what we'll be studying, was also very successful and was shown at the Blackfriars Theatre, but also, as you'll have studied in your GCSEs, the Globe Theatre. So you can imagine it in a similar setting. Let's get a brief look at what the Duchess of Malfi is about, just so you've got a bit of an idea for the rest of the activities. So we've got the actors from the Almeida production, which I went and saw this year. It was fantastic. It's a slightly more modern interpretation than obviously would have been shown in the Globe, but they stick to the language. So here are the actors with their 35-second summary.
A woman falls in love and is destroyed for it.
Oh damn, that was...
I think I did the whole play.
That is the whole play.
In a second.
Once upon a time.
Once upon a time there were 3 siblings. The Duchess of Malfi, her twin brother Ferdinand and her older brother the Cardinal.
The Duchess secretly marries a guy, Antonio.
He is a guy who is deeply frustrated and angry at the state of the court, the world in which he lives, which is deeply corrupt.
Her brothers don't want her to marry anybody, so they do it in secret.
They keep it in secret for
4 years.
I think it's non-specific, we're not 100% sure.
They hire another guy, Bossela, to spy on her.
And then her brothers, who are looking to control her and protect the wealth, when they find out, they set about to destroy her, and that has consequences for basically everybody in the play.
You nailed it.
Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why not also watch the trailer, just to really whet your appetite for the text and get an understanding of the characters. We're going to be looking at the opening on the next slide, particularly the conversation between Antonio, which is our protagonist, the Duchess's lover, and Basola, who's the malcontent, a very grumpy, pessimistic, yet sometimes humorous character who's often misused by the Duchess's corrupt brothers. So just watch out for those two.
So to great men, the moral may be stretched. Men oft are valued high when they're most wretched.
Okay, and so that brings us to my favourite bit, which is actually jumping into the text and having a look at it. So this is from the opening scene. Antonio has returned from France and is discussing with his best friend Delio how wonderful the French courts are. Now he's returned from France to Italy, but on the next slide we'll discuss the context of that a little more. He is less than satisfied with the courts in Italy. As you can see from the criticism we're going to be looking at, the two very powerful players in this are the Cardinal, one of the Duchess's brothers, and Ferdinand, which is the Duchess's other twin brother. And they're both villainous characters, flawed, and you can see in the opening they really sort of show the corruption between the two by the language that they use. So I'm going to read for you the actual extract. In class we probably read around, I'd ask volunteers to perform or read round in the circle. Bosola. I do haunt you still. So? I have done you better service than to be slighted thus. Miserable age, where only the reward of doing well is the doing of it. You enforce your merit too much. I fell into the galleys in your service, where for 2 years together I wore 2 towels instead of a shirt, with a knot on the shoulder after the fashion of a Roman mantle. Slighted thus, I will thrive some way. Blackbirds fatten best in hard weather. Why not I in these dog days? Would you could become honest! With all your divinity, do but direct me the way to it. I have known many travel far for it, and yet return as arrant knaves as they went forth, because they carried themselves always along with them. Are you gone? Some fellows, they say, are possessed with the devil, but this great fellow were able to possess the greatest devil and make him worse. So here Bosola is saying to the Cardinal that actually he went to prison for a job that the Cardinal asked him to do. You might wonder what that job was. It's pretty violent, and I'm not going to spoil it at the moment. Essentially, Bosola goes into prison, returns to the Cardinal for his reward, and the Cardinal is dismissive of him. Okay, so you should just try to be a good person. You should be honest now. That's how you'll actually get your reward. So he slights Bosola. Bosola is left on the stage with Antonio and Delio, who've been gossiping in the background earlier on. Antonio notices Bosola and wishes to hear a little more of what's happened. He hath denied thee some suit. He and his brother are like plum trees that grow crooked over standing pools. They are rich and o'erladen with fruit, but none but crows, pies, and caterpillars feed on them. Could I be one of their flattering panders, I would hang on their ears like a horse leech till I were full, and then drop off. I pray, leave me, who would rely upon these miserable dependencies in expectation to be advanced tomorrow? What creature ever fed worse than hoping Tantalus? Nor ever died any man more fearfully than he that hoped for a pardon. There are rewards for hawks and dogs when they have done us service, but for a soldier that hazards his limbs in a battle, nothing but a kind of geometry is his last supportation. So Bosola is pretty bitter here. And what's interesting is you'll notice the imagery involved, and that's where we as English literature students really get involved with the text. I'm going to zoom in on some of the imagery he uses. He discusses and describes him like a plum tree. You can see in the picture there that plum trees are fruitful, often seen with positive connotations, fruit and nature meaning to give life. But you can see that he goes on to say that it grows crooked, meaning it's corrupt, it's kind of going the wrong way. Over standing pools, you can see in the next image it shows stagnant water. And this is where he's talking about the court here, really. So he's saying that the Cardinal and, by implication, Ferdinand, the brother, are both like this plum tree, okay, that are grown over the court of the stagnant water, okay, so it's a rotten place. And they, with their fruit, feed all the people in the court. But notice he describes them as crows, pies, and caterpillars. Okay, so all of these things are kind of parasitic. They feed off them in a very negative way, in a very poisonous way. He then goes on himself to say, would I be one of those? Would I be like a leech sucking their blood, sucking their riches? Yes, he would. He just wants to advance himself. Okay, but then he goes on to lament the fact that he's been disregarded, being given less credit, less reward than a hawk or a dog would. So you can see the poor treatment that the Cardinal and Ferdinand give him as well. What the message is here, and that follows on from Antonio and Delio's discussion earlier on, is that the court is completely corrupt and full of people who will flatter and who will say whatever the leaders want in order to stay on their side and profit off of them. It's all about money and it's all about power. And they're both very toxic characters. From the language we can see this. So you can see from that description that the two people who are at the top of the hierarchy within the Italian court are shown to be corrupt, and that the rest of the court as well feeds off of that corruption. Okay, so it's all quite toxic. Where does this come from? And for that we turn to our historical context. So Webster begins his play actually with Antonio describing an ideal court in France. This then helps him to hold up a mirror almost to the court that he returns to in Italy, which is actually meant to symbolise the one in England. Okay, so at this point, King James I had been on the throne for about 10 years when it was first performed. This play was first performed. So we might wonder if actually Webster was making a comment on the English court. You can see there it says that James's court was infamous for its profligacy and corruption. So it was decadent, and boy oh boy it was corrupt as well. He had favourites, he gave them lots of money, land, riches, titles, okay, and it might be that Webster was criticising this. The Jacobean court, okay, so in the times of James I, the Jacobean court had a reputation for all of this corruption, as well as lots of licentious sexual behaviour, okay, which you'll find as well later on in the Duchess of Malfi. We won't go into that too much now. So we've got all of these features here of the Italian court, but maybe they are actually things that Webster is criticising about the English court. Okay, later on, Basola actually is used as a spy by the Cardinal. He's re-employed by him, and he spies on our protagonist, the Duchess. Okay, and again, this was something that was said to have gone on quite a lot in James I's court. Okay, so lots of things in there, but Webster obviously values his life, doesn't want to end up seen as treasonous, so he bases it in Italy. This is also helped by the fact that he bases it off a real story, as I said earlier, about something that happened in the Italian courts in Amalfi. But you can see that the historical context is quite useful here for us to understand the criticism of corrupt courts. So what you've had there is actually a whistle-stop tour through the different assessment objectives. From assessment objective 1, we understand the character's view of the court as corrupt and that the brothers encourage this. AO2, we analyse the imagery that Basola uses, the metaphor about the plum tree and the sycophants at the courts like scavenging parasites. The context from AO3, we understand that Webster might be critiquing King James I's court, but has cleverly disguised this by setting it in Italy. AO4 and AO5 we haven't touched on, but I think you might be able to have a think on this yourselves. So AO4, are there any comparisons you could make to Romeo and Juliet from this? Are there any corrupt characters? Are there any interesting family relationships in there? Is there anyone you would say is a malcontent? Okay, so someone that perhaps at times might seem bitter. Maybe you might scoot towards Mercutio, who also has quite a dark humour that Basola has as well. And your AO5, having those different interpretations. Michael Neal, a critic, once described Basola as equivocal, meaning uncertain or questionable in nature. Do you think he is uncertain? Do you think he's ambiguous? Do you think he changes throughout the play? Or do you think he sets out his opinion quite clearly? You've only just started studying it, so you don't know for sure, but you might want to interpret it in different ways. At this point, it seems like he clearly sets out his opinion, but we also know that he does end up later on working for the Cardinal. So, will he have to be duplicitous in that? Do we know really where his morals lay? And that's something to think about for your AO5. So, that's really been the whistle-stop tour through a lesson that you might do for English literature. We've packed quite a lot in. Obviously, our lessons thrive off of discussion, off of student participation. For drama, you might act or read it. And then for novels and for poetry as well, it'll be much more interactive than just a narrated PowerPoint. But hopefully we've given you a bit of a taster and whetted your appetite for the course. Any questions, feel free to pop them in the Teams area, or to email myself. I'm the curriculum leader for English, and you can find my address on the website if you don't already have it. Thank you.